Hey everyone, you will see that this video starts in a really strange way, like the part where it actually starts. That's because she was sleeping, she's still sleeping, and I was speaking very slowly so that I wouldn't wake her up. And then I realized that you couldn't actually hear anything in the first seconds of the video. So this video is about choosing parenting books. How many you should choose, why you should choose them, do you really need them? Do I have book recommendations? So that's what it's all about, and let's move on to it. Parenting books. Parenting books. As you might know from previous videos, me and my partner, we live in the Netherlands and we have 3 kids together. That's the youngest one. She's 4 months old, and we have two older daughters. One is four, just turned four, and the other just turned 7. As we both love reading, it was only natural that we would look into books for help to get over challenges that come with parenting. We've made some mistakes along the way, some bad choices maybe, or some things that we wish we would have read earlier. So these are the things that I want to share with you a bit. I am going to make some specific book recommendations or even talk about types of books to avoid. But of course, you can feel free to make your own choices. So that's more a guide on how to choose than on specific books. And I'm not claiming I've read thousands of them, but I will also explain in the video why. So for me, it's really important to start reading or to start working with yourself before you even get pregnant with your partner or on your own, whichever one you choose to get a child, or even before adopting, if that's the way you want to go, or even before becoming a foster parent. Because going into parenting with lots of traumas or unresolved issues of your own can make things really harder, and you are not breaking the chain, you're not breaking the circle, and then trauma goes on and even multiplies for following generations. Uh, so for us, like I was, well, we were both super lucky, really. I mean, we grew up in Greece in the mid 80s, 90s, 2000, and our parents were really loving. We have no major trauma that you would think of, that you would describe by seeing the way we grew up. But we both had some unresolved issues that we wanted to work through and process, and things that we didn't want to repeat with our own children. And we actually realized these things by reading the books by Alice Miller. These are two books that I highly, highly recommend. This one is The Drama of the Gifted Child. And then it's this one, like Breaking Down the Wall of Silence. Uh, and Alice Miller has also written more books. You can read like there are many critics talking about her in a negative way because her own son actually didn't talk with her in the end. But anyway, she was a very good researcher, and she talks about how when you have really hardcore childhood trauma, like let's say if you lived through a war, or if you were orphaned, or these kind of things, how you block things completely and your mind doesn't want to deal with them, and how it's important to actually, preferably with the guidance of a specialist, that you revisit that trauma and you deal with it and you resolve it before going on to having your own kids, ideally, or whenever you figure things out, you figure out that okay, there is something wrong. So for me, the moment you think, okay, I want to bring another person into my life, I want to bring children into my life, looking for books that can actually help you, even going to therapy if it's necessary to solve your own issues first, is quite important. So this is the first category of books that for me it's crucial. The, let's call them self-help books, but I'm not talking the cheap kinds, bestseller self-help books. Um, then, if you're going to get a baby through getting pregnant yourself, I do recommend getting. I scared her. Um, Getting informed about the process of getting pregnant, the pregnancy itself, and birth. Like the way you give birth, it's crucial. It's the beginning of the new life into the world. Well, the beginning is conception, but coming earthside. I have this retro book that I really, really love. It's in Greek, and it's called Birth is Love. It was gifted to me by a very dear friend of my mother, and also like I consider her like a motherly figure in my life as well. And it was written, I believe, in the 70s or something like that. And it's great. It was actually quite revolutionary for Greece because it talks about the role of midwives and how a midwife can support you. I want to show you a picture that well, so yeah, I would say 80s, um but it's really good. It's really empowering even if you read it now because it talks about how your body is yours, how your body can give birth, is capable of giving birth. Certainly the medical community should be there in case that there is a medical situation that we can't deal with on our own. But reading and knowing how your body works, how your fertility works, there is another book that I very often see recommended that's called Taking Charge of Your Fertility, that talks about menstrual cycles and hormones, these kind of things. So definitely, like, know your body, know how your body works, know what plays an important role into fertility. In the age that we live now, do do some research when it comes to what you eat, what you drink, the environment where you live, uh, all the pollutants that are in your environment, hormone disruptors that are around us. There are many, many couples that have a difficulty getting a child, and their test might be coming out good, but there are so many factors that can really affect why you might have difficulty conceiving. And the only way to deal with it, of course, if there is like a serious like mechanical issue, then indeed doctors can help. But changing your lifestyle when you get informed can really make a huge difference. Like things like smoking, drinking, not sleeping enough, being way too stressed, having too much plastic around you, using harsh chemicals when you clean your house, all these things. There are books about these things. You can read about these things. You can look for peer-reviewed papers about these things. So take charge of your fertility, of your partner's fertility through knowledge, through reading. So for me, these books really count as parenting books as well, and I find them really important. Next, let's say your little miracle is born and comes earthside. There are many books that focus on strategies on solving issues. Books that focus more on communication, books that are more theoretical and focus more on the research that has been done on human nature, on children's development, these kind of things. The last category is my favorite, and I will tell you why. First, a disclaimer. We do raise our kids in a rather like hippie style attachment parenting kind of thing. As you can see, like I breastfeed them for a long time. I breastfed my oldest till she was 5. Tandem fed her with her younger sister for 2 years. The middle one, breastfed for 3 years. This one is breastfeeding. I carry them all around. Well, not the oldest ones, but when they're babies, I like to carry my babies around in a carrier. We co-sleep with our kids as well until they are old enough to want to sleep on their own, or we are tired. So around 1 year, 2 years, they go to their room, but we always go to them or we let them come in our room. So that's the kind of parenting that we do. And for us, letting a child cry is not an option. Of course, it's an option if the child is just frustrated and we can't really do much for them, because like letting children cry is also letting them express their emotions. But what I mean is I wouldn't sleep train a child and let it cry. And why? It doesn't have to do with us being soft. It has to do with related research that really shows how letting a child cry it out can actually damage their brain and damage their future attachments and their future relationships and these kind of things. So I'm quite a geek when it comes to that, like reading this kind of papers and research. So that's where I stand. That's where we are from. Maybe you're from a completely different perspective or point of view. But yeah, I'm sharing my own life experience here. So some books that I really highly recommended in this kind of attachment parenting cycles, let's call them, are the books of Thomas Gordon, and there is a whole organization like, see here it says Gordon Hellas. So they are giving workshops for parents, and it's called pet training in English. The workshops that they are giving, and the Greek title is The Secrets of the Effective Parent. And I think there are Gordon trainings in many countries, certainly in the Netherlands, certainly in Greece, many other countries as well. And this focuses on communicating effectively with your child and on finding win-win solutions, not going into conflict with your child, and learning that some problems are your child's problems and they can deal with them, and some problems are your own problems. It gives lots of tips and tricks and strategies to deal with issues. The book I've read it also in Dutch and parts of it in English. It gives examples with dialogues and everyday life situations that help you understand a bit how this works. Disclaimer, I'm not a fan because while I like the theory of nonviolent communication and resolving conflicts with your kids and these kind of things, it does have a language that's a bit too American for me. Especially like the English method, it's a lot of win-win. It talks about win-win situations and these kind of things. And the whole setup with workshops offered everywhere, it's a bit too commercialized for me. And I think it actually disempowers parents a bit, in the sense that if you read the book, yes, you could apply it, would help you, but following a workshop would be better. So I think they monetize it a bit too much. That said, really good ideas, really good tips and tricks and effective ways of communicating within the same line, like the same kind of approach. This is a really nice book. How to talk so kids will listen, and listen so kids will talk. Again, this has also many things that you can find also in Marshall's nonviolent communication things, and also similar points with Gordon. It comes with these like retro comic pages that are actually a good reminder of what you can do. It comes also with working sheets, so it presents you with a situation and then it asks you to fill in what you would do now that you have the information of how you would deal with the situation better. Both those books, Gordon and this one by Faber and Maslitz, they are based on gentle parenting and attachment parenting. So I like them enough. And then we move on to my actually favorite type of books. And these are the books that empower you as a parent. They give you the information, and the information makes you strong and allows you to trust your instincts on these topics. So this book I recommend to every parent. It's like Hold On to Your Kids. I'm really doing like a groupie about this book. If you talk to me more than 5 minutes, then I will mention this book most likely. And what this book does, it talks about the relationships of children with their peers and how in today's society we actually expect from kids to be independent way sooner than they biologically normally would be sooner, how we push them from 3 months old here in the Netherlands to go to a daycare. And we are really happy when they want to have lots of play dates and be away from home so we can do our work, especially now with the corona times. We're really happy when we have time to do things for ourselves, and we are proud that our kids are independent. Well, they shouldn't be that independent. They need us. And just to summarize the book super quickly, when you let your kid be with peers, their attachment with their peers will be to them more important than their attachment to you. So whatever their peers say will be more important, whatever their peers do will be more important. You think they're independent, they are not. They are following a bunch of monkeys and they are imitating each other. And they're basically a group of blind people guiding each other around. That's not good for many, many reasons. But this book doesn't actually give you tips, tricks, and strategies. It gives you theory. It explains why things are not good the way they are. They might be normal, but they are not optimal the way we are, the way our society functions. and it empowers you to build your attachment with your children again, using your own instincts, your own parenting style, and yeah, just you can build your own personal approach by having the knowledge in this book. I'm really happy I read it now that my kids are so young. It was recommended to me by a parent coach, Christina, who I really think is a treasure, because she gave me really good recommendations. And the other favorite books in this lot here is also are also her recommendations, some of them. So moving on to another book about knowledge and not tips and tricks, or not just tips and tricks, is this book, like Mindset by Carol Dweck. It's a bestseller, and I mentioned before jokingly that, yeah, you shouldn't read those cheap bestsellers. Well, actually, that was wrong. Some of these bestsellers are bestsellers for a reason. And if these books sell millions of copies, why isn't the world a better place? Well, because there's a big difference between reading what you should be doing and actually doing it. So reading these books is a good first step, but implementing what you read, that's a tough one, especially on days that you're tired, you have no energy, and your kids are screaming like crazy, and. But anyway, this book is about the growth mindset, and what it says, really, like the tiny summary, it says that actually we are not born with a set IQ. We are not born with a fixed set of qualities, but we can, through hard work, actually develop the qualities that we want and need in our life. And it has many examples about it, and it's really chock full of research. Like, in general, whatever book you choose, make sure that it has like a nice long list of literature at the back. And by the way, not just the author referencing authors' older works, but also other people doing research in the same field. So the growth mindset, I find it very important whether you have kids or not, because it can really change your life. And there are also many talks of Carol Dweck on YouTube that you can watch for free, and she talks about how she herself had a fixed mindset and always wanted to be the best and perfect, and how these things do not actually exist, and how limiting they can be, and how they can result in paralyzing perfectionism. So knowing how to actually fulfill your own potential can help you guide your child to fulfill their own potential. I'm not going to name any names, but we might have in our family one or more people who actually are quite perfectionistic and have been limited by this, in not daring to try new things, or starting out but then procrastinating and not moving forward with their projects because they're afraid of failure. And I think this book is really helpful. An example that Beck gives is that she graduated from a school that if you didn't pass the exams, you got a grade not yet. And I find it so liberating that it's not that you failed, it's just that you haven't succeeded yet. You're not on this level yet. Super helpful. In relation to that, to being an intense person and being a perfectionistic person, maybe even being a gifted person. Just a second. Okay, sorry for the interruption, but Nikos asked me something. I wanted to see what it was. It was about food. Food is important. So, where was I? Yes. So, if you're a person that is intense or perfectionistic, or maybe even gifted in some aspects, it's quite good to read about this, because it's highly likely that your children might as well have these features that can actually, on one hand, they could propel them forward in their life, but they can also be limiting in many other ways, like the fear of failure that I mentioned before. So this is a wonderful book, Living with Intensity, that talks about the theory of intense people. And yes, most toddlers are intense, and they will throw tantrums, and they will be annoyed with everything, and they go through phases, especially when they go through growth spurts. But if you mention that your child has more features of a sensitive soul, and you don't need to label them like highly sensitive or gifted or whatever, but if you notice that your child has a bit of difficulty with stimulating environments, with being overstimulated, with dealing with hard things about the world, like death or war or worrying about everything. I do think it's a good idea to look into these books, look into Living with Intensity. And this is another book recommended to me by our parent coach, Emotional Intensity in Gifted Students. This book is more like a tips, tricks, how-tos kind of book. So if you would choose one of them, then I would go for this one, because that's much more theory and feeling empowered, and that's more a practical guide and how to deal with gifted students in a classroom. And if you haven't read this one, you might feel, yeah, my kid is average. I don't think it's I can relate to it, or it's useful for me. I think it is useful for everyone, gifted or not, but it's more an addition to the other one. So the other one's more theory, more empowering. That's more practice, how to tips and tricks that might or might not work. But it also emphasizes that what works for one child might not work for another. So it talks about trial and error, not giving up, and how to be your child's best advocate. Especially if you have a kid with a diagnosis like autism or ADHD, or I don't know, this type of, like, if you have a child that it's non-neurotypical and they get a diagnosis, then you do have to be informed so you can actually defend your child's best interest. This is not the case for our household, but it is for many people out there. So do get informed. And another book that I find really, really useful is this one, Sitting Still Like a Frog. I'm not recommending getting this specific book, but I do recommend getting some books that teach children mindfulness, because it can really help them have some peace, be centered, be grounded. It can help them deal better with transitions, especially during this time of Corona, that was really crazy in many countries, that kids would go to school, then there was a lockdown, then there was school again. And especially for young kids, that can be really, really hard. But for everyone, it has been proven that meditation can really help you, and mindfulness can really help you reduce your stress levels, which then in turn leads to better health and reduces your chances of having all sorts of illnesses, be it like psychosomatic illnesses, or more serious things like from eczema to cancer. These things are linked also with stress and how we respond to it. So our generation had to learn this, at least like in Western Europe, now that we're in our 30s or 40s. But teaching this to young children is actually a really nice gift. So if you first know and practice mindfulness and meditation, it's much easier to transfer this knowledge to your children. So I personally think that it's much better to read one book and implement it and see if it works than half reading 3 or 4, because in many of these books, like, it's easy that you get over enthusiastic and you go and order 10 of them, and then you don't have time to read them all, and then you half read them and you don't reach the right conclusions or a conclusion at all, and you're overwhelmed, and in the end you don't make any changes. So my advice would be, get one book at a time, read it, try to implement what you read, maybe write down a summary to see what got stuck in your head and what didn't, reread it if need be, and then you can move on to the following book. I find books actually more useful than online Facebook support groups for parents. I do understand we do not have the village now in our modern society, so it's also really helpful if you can find a Facebook group or another social media group with like-minded people. I am following a couple of them, and they're mainly centered around breastfeeding or natural birth or these kind of things. But in many of these groups, people do also tend to be a bit fanatic. So if you're in attachment parenting groups, you can often see that people can become quite polemic and even abusive with each other if someone is not following the super strict guidelines that they feel are the right ones. So if you're a person that finds it hard to interact with others and really takes things personally, remember that in these groups, people just sit behind their keyboard and just vent out. A book cannot do that to you. So if you're in a phase in your parenting journey that you feel a bit fed up with everything and you don't have much mental capacity, I'd say focus your mental capacity in a book rather than scrolling on social media and trying to find advice for the challenges that you are facing. And yeah, don't overdo it. Just one book at a time, I think, is enough. And then as your child grows, you can find more books that are relevant to your challenges. But I think for me, like I mentioned before, I'm glad I read the Hold On to Your Kids book that talks about attachment to peers now early on, so that when my child is older and more attached to peers, I already have the knowledge to deal with it if I see that it gets out of hand. So also reading a bit in advance can help you feel also a bit in control. And I'm saying a bit all the time because I mean kids are really new human beings. They have their own world. They expand. They evolve in ways that we can't always predict. But it's important to be flexible and try and guide them to their journey as they become adults and they don't need our parenting anymore. And if we are successful in our parenting, well, hopefully by the time they're 18, 19, 20, 25, they would be able to make their own decisions and not make too many mistakes. Mistakes are unavoidable and we also grow from them, so it's okay, but at least they're not fatal mistakes. So this is my approach when it comes to parenting books. Hopefully you found it a bit helpful and inspiring to go and order and pick a book instead of scrolling through social media. And if you have any good book recommendations, like parenting book recommendations, please feel free to leave them in the comments and I will definitely take a look at them. Have a nice day. Bye.